First part. I wasn't expecting a thank you, but I also didn't expect to be insulted in front of the entire executive board. It was the annual performance review meeting, 12 people, 12 chairs, one long glass table where futures were made, reshaped, or destroyed. For me, this meeting was supposed to be the moment I finally got what I'd earned, a VP promotion after 6 years of solving every disaster this company managed to set on fire. Instead, I got a smile from my boss, Gretchen, and a sentence I'll never forget. "Naomi, we appreciate your passion, but leadership requires stability, not emotion." The board murmured politely. A few nods. One awkward cough. Bryce, the smug golden boy who joined last year, smirked like he'd already won. Because he had. Gretchen slid the promotion packet toward him like she was handing over a menu. I sat there, frozen, cheeks burning. Passion? Emotion? I'd stayed up 3 nights straight rewriting press releases after our data leak last quarter. I was the one who talked down a billionaire client after a marketing team sent the wrong deck. I had trained Bryce while he watched YouTube videos on alpha confidence at his desk. But apparently, I was the one who lacked stability. The rest of the meeting blurred. Polite farewells. Air kisses. A shallow smile from HR. I walked out, heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor, straight into the restroom. Not to cry, but to breathe. Deep, long breaths to push the heat out of my lungs before it turned into rage. When I finally looked in the mirror, I saw someone dangerous. A woman who just realized she'd been underestimated. One time too many. I didn't plot revenge right away. That's what makes this story different. I wasn't out for blood. Not yet. What I wanted was clarity. So I took a step back. Observed. I listened in meetings without speaking. I started noting every time Bryce passed off my work as his. Every time Gretchen called me passionate when she meant annoying or difficult. Every time the executives asked me to polish things that Bryce or Gretchen had clearly messed up. Then something strange happened. Bryce got invited to speak on a small regional panel, something I used to handle. He tanked. He stuttered through 3 sentences, froze, then repeated a stat he found on Reddit. I had to clean it up in the press release. Gretchen didn't thank me. She just said, "Next time, write his talking points in simpler language." Simple. For Bryce. Of course. Still too emotional for leadership, huh? A shift happened the night I opened Gretchen's calendar by mistake. We shared executive access through the company comms suite, and I was scheduling something for my intern. I clicked too fast and found myself staring at her internal event list. Buried in there. Harper and Tate Network Panel, CNN, March 19th, National Segment. Crisis Communication in the AI Age. My eyes widened. That panel was massive. National. Sponsored by a Fortune 50 firm. That kind of exposure could change your career forever. I was the one who'd pitched our company to the hosts months ago. And she didn't even mention she'd been picked. It stung, sure. But it also gave me the clearest window into her fear. Gretchen didn't just think I was too emotional. She thought I was too good to be trusted. So she kept me quiet. I decided right then. Let's see what happens when she has to speak for herself. I spent the next few weeks smiling politely and making moves. I updated our internal crisis matrix, the tool we use to track PR vulnerabilities, and assigned random errors to Bryce's department. They weren't real. Just shadows. Red flags. The kind that made executives nervous. I redirected a few email chains, perfectly legal ones. But ones where Gretchen ignored legal warnings about internal AI bias reports. All it took was one accidental CC to a trusted journalist I used to work with, Lauren Dane. No NDA broken. No lies told. I anonymously submitted a tip to Harper and Tate's panel coordinator about our company's controversial stance on algorithmic discrimination. Just enough to make them ask slightly tougher questions. I leaked an old training video of Gretchen mispronouncing metaverse 3 different ways at an industry retreat. Petty? Maybe. But viral? Instantly. She still had to go live. That ship had sailed. The night before the panel, Gretchen sent me an email. "Need you to prep a comms briefing for tomorrow's segment. Make me look bulletproof. Bulletproof. You'd think a woman about to go on national TV would at least know when she's standing on a minefield. I opened her document, edited a few phrases, added some neutral talking points. Nothing misleading, just incomplete. Then I pressed send and waited. March 19th, 9:58 a.m. Live segment begins. I watched from my laptop at home, sipping tea, a fuzzy blanket on my lap. Bryce wasn't in yet. The team group chat was dead silent. The host introduced the panelists, an MIT researcher, a Fortune 100 COO, a nonprofit watchdog, and Gretchen Mills, SVP of Communications, Halixon Global. She smiled, polished, confident, for 30 seconds. Then the host asked her, "There have been concerns about Halixon's internal AI audits, particularly surrounding fairness and bias. Do you think your company's response has been adequate?" She blinked, smiled, then stammered, "We have a strong commitment to innovation and transparency, which are key pillars." The MIT researcher interrupted. "Transparency? Your internal reports were flagged 3 times for altering audit data." The host raised an eyebrow. "Didn't your department oversee that?" I watched the blood drain from her face. The camera zoomed slightly. A protest sign flashed behind her in the crowd. Halixon silences data truths. That wasn't my doing. But it didn't hurt. Gretchen looked straight at the camera. And for a single second she broke. Tears welled. Her voice cracked. She whispered, "This isn't fair." And just like that, the woman who called me too emotional cried on national TV. I never spoke a word. I didn't gloat. Didn't send a clip to the group chat. I just showed up to work Monday morning, calm as still water. Gretchen didn't look at me. Bryce avoided eye contact. But legal? They called me in quietly and said, "We think it's time you took on more responsibility. Maybe even a title change." I smiled. The title didn't matter anymore. Because I already knew. Emotion didn't make me weak. It made me dangerous. There's a special kind of pain when your achievements are filtered through someone else's insecurities. And sitting in that glass-walled conference room, watching Lydia present my work as her new initiatives, I felt that burn all over again. She stood at the front like she was born under fluorescent lights and false flattery. "We'll be piloting this outreach funnel in Q3, pending legal review. It's based on a framework I've developed over the last few months, with a heavy emphasis on emotionally intelligent segmentation." She said emotionally intelligent like it was a joke, like she was reclaiming the insult she'd thrown at me days earlier when she told me I was too emotional to lead. I blinked. Once. The whole room, full of execs from regional offices, nodded. Clapped. One even muttered, "Brilliant pivot." I had written that segmentation model during a flu-ridden week when Lydia was on vacation in Tulum. She had responded with a thumbs-up emoji when I sent it. That was it. Now here she was, standing in front of me, repackaging my work like it had sprouted from her own spreadsheet-soaked skull. And that would have been the moment to speak up, right? Except I didn't. Not then. Because I wasn't ready for a war yet. I needed more than just my voice to take her down. I needed a platform. And I already knew where to get one. After the meeting, she breezed past my desk. "Don't sulk, Ilara. It's unbecoming. Try taking notes next time, She smiled sweetly and dropped a sticky note on my keyboard. "Coffee later? Decompression time. XXL." The audacity wasn't even subtle anymore. Lydia didn't just want to win. She wanted me to watch her when using my pieces. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up my hidden Google Drive folder, the one titled Ophelia. Ophelia was my alias for a podcast I'd started during the pandemic. At first, it was just about office politics and subtle sexism, told through fictionalized, anonymous stories. But by season 3, it had gained traction, and even a sponsorship. Most people at work didn't know I was the voice behind it. And now, Ophelia was about to make a comeback. That night, I started scripting the first episode in a new arc I called The Water Cooler Witch Trials. I told a story, veiled, of course, about a woman who had built a brilliant segmentation model only to have it stolen by her emotionally manipulative boss. I changed names, industries, job titles, but the venom? That was all mine. Within 24 hours of publishing the episode, comments flooded in.
Ugh, this.
Every female professional has met a Lydia. I hope Ophelia gets revenge. I'm so tired of women being told they're too emotional just for standing up for themselves. This one hit hard. Subscribed. 1 week later, a podcast aggregator on LinkedIn listed my episode under Top 5 Must-Listens About Women in the Workplace. I sent it to Lydia anonymously. Of course. She responded in the group chat. LOL. Another fictional sob story. Women like this hold themselves back. She didn't know she'd just sent that to the author. But if I wanted her to crumble, I had to step into the real arena. The Easton Leadership Symposium was coming up, an annual event where mid-level women professionals spoke on panels to challenge industry bias. It was televised regionally. It had a Q&A session, and it was Lydia's favorite place to prance around in pastels and preach about lifting other women. I submitted my name quietly, under my real credentials, not as Ophelia, as Alara Madsen. My proposal? The weaponization of emotion in female professional spaces. Weeks passed. I got the email. Accepted. Live panel. National segment. And just like that, the final phase began. Lydia found out before I could even tell her. She stormed into my cubicle wearing a blazer 2 sizes too small and a look that could kill. Why didn't you tell me you applied to Easton? I didn't blink. It's an independent submission. I didn't think it was relevant. Her mouth twitched. You know I have connections there. I could have helped you'd framed it better. Emotion isn't your strongest suit, Alara. I smiled just a bit. That's funny. I thought that's why I wasn't promoted. The air went still. She hated being reminded of what she'd done, of what she'd said. You really want to do this, huh? She asked. You want to turn this into a circus? I leaned back in my chair and folded my hands.
No.
I want to turn it into a mirror. She walked away. I could hear her heels clicking faster than usual. The weeks leading up to Easton were a blur of preparation. My inbox was overflowing. I worked late, slept less, edited my speech ruthlessly. But one night, while reviewing the final cut of a podcast episode, I noticed something strange. An IP address from our office network had accessed my RSS feed. Multiple times. Always at midnight. And always right after I uploaded a draft. Lydia. She knew. She was listening. I had 2 choices. Back down or blow the whole thing open. I chose the latter. I rewrote my closing remarks the night before the panel. I removed the safe phrasing. I included direct lines that mirrored things Lydia had said to me. Things only she and I would recognize, but anyone watching would understand the meaning behind. I wasn't naming her. I was revealing her. On the day of the symposium, the room was packed.
Lights.
Cameras. Rows of poised women. Industry journalists. Board members. Even a few quiet male execs in the back. Lydia sat in the second row. I stepped onto the stage wearing the navy pantsuit she once mocked me for. And when the moderator passed me the mic, I began. They told me I was too emotional to lead, that I overexplained, that I apologized too often, that I cried once, and it meant I couldn't handle pressure. But when a man throws a chair during a budget meeting, he's called passionate. This isn't about emotion. It's about control.
Gasps.
Snaps. Applause. I went on, and by the time I said, when women lead with empathy, we're told we're fragile. But when others steal that empathy and use it for credit, no one calls that theft. They call it initiative. Lydia was red-faced.
Tears.
Real ones. She rushed out before the panel ended. The camera caught it. The feed didn't cut. And Twitter? Lit up like a wildfire. The office was unusually quiet when I returned the next morning. You know that kind of silence that hums with hidden judgment? That's what greeted me when I walked past the rows of cubicles. No one said anything, but the stares were louder than words. I half expected someone to drop a teacup, just for the dramatic flair. I didn't blame them. After what happened yesterday, after I'd walked out of a team meeting while our VP, Valerie Hampton, essentially called me too emotional to handle a leadership role, I had become the unofficial morning headline of our corporate jungle. I walked straight to my desk, opened my laptop, and pretended not to notice the glances. That's when I saw it, an email from HR. Subject: follow-up conversation request. I exhaled slowly. There it was. The system responding to my defiance. I had either poked the bear or stirred the hornet's nest, and either way, I was going to bleed. Still, I didn't feel regret. Just rage. Quiet, calculated rage. Valerie wasn't in the office that morning. Of course she wasn't. People like her never stand in the aftermath. They fly above it, dripping in sincerity and delegation. But I knew her absence wasn't about fear. It was about power. She wanted to make me wait, anticipate.
Stew.
What she didn't know was, I was already preparing my next move. That night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I spent hours digging through files, old meeting minutes, emails, video conference records, anything that could paint a clearer picture of what had been building for months. Valerie hadn't just made one dismissive comment. She'd been planting seeds of doubt about me for a year, just subtle enough to avoid detection, but steady enough to rot my credibility. But what really chilled me was finding a recording of a leadership team meeting from 3 months ago. I'd presented a proposal, one that eventually got scrapped. In the footage, after I left the call, Valerie leaned back and said to the room, "She's brilliant.
No one's arguing that.
But she leads with her feelings. We need someone who can make the hard calls without needing therapy afterward." They all laughed, even people I thought were allies. I paused the video. My chest was tight. Not because it hurt, although it did, but because this was it. Proof. I didn't go to HR the next day. Instead, I called a friend, Claire Linwood. She worked for one of the biggest investigative journalism outlets in the country, and we'd stayed in touch since college. We hadn't spoken in a while, but when I told her I had something explosive, her voice shifted from curious to razor-sharp. She invited me to her studio that weekend. Walking into that studio felt surreal. Everything smelled like ambition and anxiety. Claire handed me a coffee and led me into a private room where she started recording. She didn't push. She just let me talk. About the meetings, the patterns, the dismissals, the gaslighting, and finally, the recording. She listened with her whole body. At one point, she looked up from her notes and said, "You're not the only one, are you?" I nodded. And then I gave her names. By Tuesday, I had 2 meetings scheduled, one with HR and one with Valerie. I canceled the first. I let the second happen. Valerie walked in, cool as ever, her hair perfect, her blouse pressed like she'd never lost control a day in her life. "Let's clear the air," she said, smiling like a politician. "I think we had a misunderstanding last week. I value your contributions, and I don't want one heated moment to undo all the great work we've done together." She even reached for my hand across the table. I didn't flinch. I just looked her in the eye and said, "Are you going to pretend the meeting footage doesn't exist?" Her smile flickered. I didn't give her time to recover. I stood up, pulled out a manila envelope, and slid it across the table. "In case you want to get ahead of the story, it airs Thursday night. National. Prime time." Her face dropped. Finally, a real emotion. Irony, isn't it? I left her sitting there, blinking like a deer on a highway, her PR brain stalling as it calculated how fast everything might burn. Thursday came like a storm. The teaser ran that morning. Corporate sabotage, when women tear down other women in the name of power. My phone blew up. Some colleagues messaged me cryptic things. "You good? Did you really? Is that about us?" But the most telling reaction came from Valerie herself. She didn't come in. She didn't call. She didn't post her usual LinkedIn quotes about resilience and female empowerment. Her silence said everything. That night, the segment aired. It wasn't just my voice. It was 3 others, women from other departments, different cities, all echoing a similar experience. Each one had notes, recordings, receipts. Valerie had weaponized the too emotional narrative against multiple women to eliminate competition and protect her upward climb. The footage of her mocking me played at the 14-minute mark. The host froze the screen, replayed her words. We need someone who can make the hard calls without needing therapy afterward. And then, the host looked at the camera and said, "When empathy is punished and cruelty is rewarded, what does that say about our definition of leadership?" That night, Valerie became a national cautionary tale. The next morning, she resigned for personal reasons. HR launched a comprehensive internal review. The company issued a statement about recommitting to equity and values. And me? I got a promotion. But I didn't take it. Instead, I filed for a 1-year sabbatical to speak, write, and consult on emotional intelligence and leadership. I was booked solid for months. TEDx talks, panels, university forums, podcasts. Apparently, being too emotional was exactly what the world needed more of. And maybe that's the real victory. Not just watching someone fall, but changing the system that let them rise by stepping on people like me. Because the camera didn't lie. But neither did I. And this time people finally listened. The fallout from the gala was nuclear. By Monday morning, Marla's office door was shut. Not her usual, "don't bother me unless the building's on fire" kind of shut. This was something else. No stilettos click-clacking up and down the halls. No exaggerated sighs or passive-aggressive remarks about someone's lack of vision. It was quiet. Unnervingly quiet. By noon, an anonymous tip had leaked footage from the gala to a popular workplace blog. The clip where I said, "Maybe next time we can honor leadership that uplifts women, not exploits them." It was spliced with a slow zoom on Marla's stunned face. The post was titled, "VP exposed at Women in Tech Gala, says nothing while team member steals the stage." It had over 800,000 views by sunset. And just like that, I became the woman who called her boss out on stage and somehow survived it. But survival wasn't the endgame. Not for me. I didn't want to survive Marla. I wanted to replace her. I knew HR would drag their feet. The company had protected Marla for years. Quiet settlements, moved deadlines, performance improvement plans for employees who spoke up. But this time was different. This time, she was radioactive. Investors had questions. Clients were watching. And I had more ammo. Her Monday morning silence didn't last long. By Tuesday, Marla stormed into the office in dark sunglasses and a silk scarf like some off-brand celebrity avoiding TMZ. She didn't speak to anyone, but I caught her watching me through the glass partition. Her eyes weren't furious. They were calculating. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know what. It wasn't easy to compile. I'd spent the last 6 months gathering testimonies from former team members, screenshots of buried Slack messages, deleted emails, even proof of funding misappropriation, Marla's habit of funneling team bonuses to cover executive travel perks. Most of them had been too scared to speak up before. But after the gala, people were lining up. I packaged everything into a neat 47-page file titled, "VP Marla Crenshaw, a pattern of retaliation, misconduct, and ethical breaches." I didn't send it to HR. I sent it to the board. But I also sent it to someone else. A woman named Cameron Voss. You might have heard of her. Investigative journalist turned tech watchdog. Her exposés had taken down CEOs. I knew she wouldn't ignore what I had. Within 48 hours, she called me. "Olivia," she said, her voice sharp and intrigued. "You don't just want justice. You want change." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I want to set a precedent." Cameron smiled. I could feel it in her voice. "Let's make some noise." Meanwhile, Marla tried to claw her way back. The next week was a circus. HR summoned me for a conflict mediation session. They tried to frame it like both parties were at fault. I showed up with a lawyer. Marla looked at me like she'd swallowed glass. She didn't speak for most of the meeting, just stared. But when I left the room, I heard her voice through the frosted glass. "She's orchestrating something. Olivia always smiled too much. You can't trust women who smile that much." That's what did it for me. I smiled even wider. Cameron published the story on a Wednesday morning. By 10 a.m., hashtag Marla Crenshaw was trending on Twitter. By 3 p.m., an internal memo announced an executive leave of absence pending review. By Thursday, Cameron invited me to appear in the follow-up segment. When Ambition Becomes Abuse, Women Speaking Out in Tech. It would air on national TV. And yes, Marla would be watching. I wore the red dress. It wasn't symbolic. It wasn't to look powerful. It was because Marla once told me in a performance review, "Red is a little aggressive for someone in your position. You don't want to send the wrong message." So I made sure the whole country saw me in red. The interview was raw. I didn't dramatize anything. I didn't need to. Cameron had already done the digging. My job was to tell the truth about how women like me were gaslit, minimized, and passed over while bullies like Marla got praise for executive decisiveness. I ended with this. I was told I was too emotional for a leadership role. Maybe we need more emotion. Maybe that's what leadership's been missing. Across town, Marla was watching. How do I know? Because 5 minutes after the segment aired, I got an email. It wasn't long. Just a subject line. "You think you've won." No text. No signature. Just silence. But I didn't reply. Because it wasn't about winning. It was about changing the rules. The final twist? A week later, our company held a town hall. The CFO announced a restructured leadership strategy and a new interim VP of product development. Guess whose name was on the slide?
Mine.
The room exploded with applause. But I only looked at one person. Far back, near the wall, was a man from legal. He nodded. Behind him, an empty chair. Marla's chair. Still waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. When I woke up the next morning, my inbox was a war zone. 19 missed calls, 12 voicemails, 47 emails, and a trending tag. #Marla Breakdown. Apparently, someone at the gala had recorded the moment Marla's voice cracked on stage. Her glossy, tightly controlled image melted into something much less palatable. And that emotional outburst, the one she'd once said would cost someone a career, had just cost her something even bigger. I didn't post the video. I didn't need to. The internet did it for me. Someone from PR had leaked the full panel interview, and while Marla was busy deflecting, I had simply sat back, watching from my couch with a coffee mug and a smirk. Her fake calm, her shifting eyes when the interviewer asked, "What safeguards do you have in place for fair promotion?" All of it had played in front of the entire industry, on a massive screen, with industry sponsors watching. And when I'd replied, "Well, I was told I was too emotional to be considered for leadership, but I'm grateful that integrity speaks louder than volume," the applause had started. It hadn't stopped. That Monday, I showed up to work late on purpose. Just late enough for eyes to follow me through the glass halls like a slow wave. People pretended to be typing, but they were all watching. I walked in holding a newspaper. Not because I needed one, but because the front page headline was too beautiful not to flaunt. Tech Gala Shocker. CEO's right-hand woman questions gender bias on air. Applause erupts. I didn't put it on my desk. I placed it neatly on the counter in the office kitchen, right where Marla picked up her coffee. When I returned to my cubicle, there was a sticky note on my chair. "Come upstairs."
Now.
I didn't rush. I made her wait. Her office smelled like roses and gunpowder. When I walked in, her eyes were puffy, but her voice was steel.
You orchestrated that.
"You smug little." "Stop," I said gently, "before you say something HR-worthy." Marla blinked. This wasn't the Olivia she remembered. The Olivia she passed over. The one she once humiliated in the elevator by saying, "That voice won't make it in the boardroom." No, this was the Olivia who had her own voice now. And everyone else's ears. "You humiliated me," she hissed. I tilted my head. Did I? Or did you just finally say out loud the things you've always gotten away with thinking? Her lips trembled. "I didn't need to make anything up," I continued. "Every answer you gave on stage was yours. Unedited. And the audience made their own conclusion." "You twisted the narrative," she snapped.
No, Marla.
"I handed you the mic. You just weren't ready for what you'd sound like with the speakers turned on." That same week, HR launched an internal review. Several women from the team came forward. Not just about me, about comments Marla had made over years. Tiny, stabbing things. You're not client-facing material. You come off desperate when you pitch ideas. Don't cry in here. That's not how men respect you. The stories were whispered, then they snowballed. An anonymous tip reached the board about Marla's backdoor hiring of her cousin as a consultant with a six-figure paycheck. She'd dismissed it before, but now, under the floodlight of scrutiny, it stuck. Meanwhile, I wasn't idle. While HR handled the legal side, I worked on something more poetic. Something she'd never be able to spin. It started months ago, when she asked me to compile a mentorship guide for her upcoming book deal. She wanted to publish a leadership book, something shiny and digestible about being a visionary woman in tech. She never finished it, because I had the only working draft. And guess what I found sprinkled through her manuscript?
Quotes. Mine.
Stories she'd stolen. Pitches she'd buried, now recycled as anecdotes about her own grit. So I compiled my own record, dates, Slack messages, audio clips of feedback meetings. I knew the final blow had to be quiet, calculated, and undeniable. When the board summoned us both to a closed-door meeting, Marla walked in with her blazer crisp and chin high. But I brought a USB stick. And when they asked for clarity, I gave it to them, all of it, word by word. First, I played the pitch video I'd submitted for our failed gender equity campaign. Then, the next slide, a transcript of Marla's keynote speech last quarter. Same phrasing.
Same story.
Same data. Only my name had been erased. Then came the kicker, an email dated 3 weeks before the gala, where Marla instructed me to downplay that whole emotional narrative. It's off-brand. One board member leaned forward, lips tight. So, the emotional manipulation we saw on stage was scripted, I said. And she told me to delete the original report that proved it. Marla blanched. I never. You CC'd me, Marla, I said, sliding the printed email forward. You forgot that part. The fallout was slow, silent, and final. She was placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. Her name was quietly removed from the mentorship book project. Her office was cleared by the end of the week. No press release. Just a footnote in an internal memo. Effective immediately, the executive board will transition Marla Hendricks' duties to Olivia Lorne, who will serve as interim VP of Ethics and Strategy. They gave me her desk, the same one where she once told me my voice would never matter. I didn't cry when I saw my new nameplate, but I did take a photo of it and sent it to my sister with a single caption. Guess who's too emotional now? But I wasn't done, because revenge isn't just about justice. It's about legacy, and mine was just getting started. There's a special kind of quiet that comes after a storm. Not peace exactly, but a deep, humming stillness, like the world is holding its breath. That's what the office felt like on Monday morning, 2 days after the gala. After the broadcast. After the leak. I stepped into Vitrina Tech's downtown headquarters like I was walking into sacred ground. My heels clicked across the marble floor. I snapped to me, then away. Whispers trailed behind me like silk ribbons. Not because I was in trouble, but because they knew I'd done something impossible. Marla Ford hadn't been seen since the night of the gala. Some said she'd been placed on administrative leave. Others whispered she was under investigation, pending legal review. But no one would say her name aloud. It hung in the air like a bruise. And me? I never walked taller. I bypassed my usual cubicle and headed straight for the executive wing. My access badge, miraculously, no longer turned red. The door clicked open with a soft beep. Inside, Alan Whitman, the CEO, stood behind his desk, phone in hand. He looked up at me, eyes shadowed but respectful. Olivia, he said. Sit. I sat. There was no small talk. Just the thick, sharp tension of consequence. We've reviewed the footage, Alan said, tapping his phone. The entire thing. From the gala. The hot mic. The dossier you handed to Good Morning Wall Street producers. I said nothing. I didn't apologize. I didn't twitch. Alan leaned forward. Do you know what you've done? Yes, I said. I stopped a corrupt executive from stealing years of my work while destroying others in the process. You're welcome. He blinked. Then, shockingly, he smiled. You have some steel in you, he said. I'll give you that. He slid a letter across the table. Heavy paper. Gold seal. Promotion offer. Director of Brand Strategy. Effective immediately. Full autonomy over campaigns. Direct report to Executive Board. My fingers curled around the letter. This was my job before Marla stole it, I said, voice calm. Alan nodded. We know. That's why you're getting it back. A pause. With a retroactive bonus. I looked him dead in the eye.
No.
He frowned. No. I don't want Marla's job, I said, standing. I want hers and mine. Merge the departments. Give me creative and strategy. I'll build a team that does both better than anything this company's ever seen. Alan's brow arched. That's 2 roles. That's the point, I said. And if you don't offer it, I walk. And take the next exclusive to another network. One with ratings. Silence. Then he laughed. A short, disbelieving bark of a sound. You're terrifying. I know. He grabbed a pen. Scribbled a few words on the contract. When I walked out of his office, I had a new title. Vice President, Integrated Brand Operations. 2 floors up. Corner office. Glass walls. My name on the door. But it wasn't over yet. Marla wasn't just going to vanish. Not completely. The SEC was involved now. So was the Department of Labor. Whistleblower protections kicked in the moment I turned over the emails she tried to delete. The spreadsheets she buried. The vendor invoices she rerouted to her cousin's fake company. That wasn't just manipulation. It was fraud. When investigators searched her apartment, they found 2 flash drives. One with campaign files that clearly originated from my locked archives. The other, a backup of staff evaluations, doctored to sabotage any woman she saw as competition. The case against her built itself. And when the subpoenas came down, so did Marla Ford. She tried to cut a deal, tried to play the victim, claimed I bullied her into a breakdown. But she forgot about the security footage, the email trails, the 37-page complaint I filed, co-signed by 9 other employees who finally felt brave enough to speak. Her crocodile tears dried up fast when the handcuffs clicked. 2 months later, I stood in front of a packed auditorium at the National Women in Leadership Summit. Behind me, a massive screen showed the title of my keynote, Weaponized Emotion. How too emotional became my superpower. The crowd leaned in. I used to think emotion was weakness, I told them. That if I cried at work or got angry when someone stole my ideas, it made me less of a professional. But emotion is information. And when weaponized against the right enemy, it becomes power. They clapped. They stood. Some cried. I didn't. I owned the moment. Because behind that applause was the real victory. They saw me, not as a problem, not as a liability, but as a leader. And Marla? She watched the speech from a courtroom holding cell. Epilogue. One final note. About 6 months after everything went down, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single note card. Handwritten.
Sloppy ink.
Shaky pen. You were right. I didn't see you coming. I thought I was untouchable.
But you?
You broke me in front of the world. And I guess I deserved it. I stared at it for a long time, then tossed it into the shredder. I don't need her apology. I don't need her guilt. Because she was right about one thing. She didn't see me coming. But now, everyone else does. And I'll never be invisible again.